And in that regards, I think the skills enablement of the employees in the cloud technology is super important. Like it goes without saying that you can come up with a cloud project in an organization, and if you don't skill up those employees of that organization, good luck operationalizing that workload.
Welcome back to another episode of Unplugged, an IIoT podcast. Today, we've got an incredible conversation lined up for you, full of insights that you're not going to want to miss. But before we dive into that, I want to take a quick moment to thank our main sponsor today, Smithtek. Smithtek specializes in turnkey hardware and software solutions, making remote monitoring and control a breeze. Whether it's agriculture, mining, industrial automation, or even environmental monitoring, Smithtek has you covered. Built right in Perth, Western Australia, their products are reliable, scalable, and adaptable to your needs, whether you're managing pumps, irrigation systems, or generators from afar. Plus, with their web-based SCADA system and support for a wide range of industrial protocols, integrating your systems is seamless. Their user-friendly interface gives you real-time control anytime, anywhere. If you're looking for a smarter way to manage your assets, Smithtek makes it easy and efficient. With that said, let's dive into today's conversation.
Hello and welcome to Unplugged, an IoT podcast where we delve into the fascinating world of industrial Internet of Things and automation. I'm your host, Phil Saboa.
G'day, Phil, and hello everyone. I'm Ed Fuentes. Well, Phil, quite exciting today. We're really getting some great guests appearing on our shows, and today we have a very special guest, is Deependra Shekhawat. He's the Specialist Solutions Architect at Amazon Web Services, and I think you and I, Phil, will be talking a lot about cloud and hearing our customers talk about cloud. So we're quite excited to hear from Deeps today. He's got over 15 years experience in cloud and IoT. He has helped organizations across industries, and actually he's in India at the moment, so we're recording this across a couple of continents, which is fun. But we're going to delve deeper across what he's been doing around industries like energy and utilities, just to help customers achieve those transformative results. So we're quite excited to do a deep dive today and get his insights. What do you think, Phil?
Yeah, Deeps, it's great having you here on the show today. I guess before we get started into talking cloud architectures and everything cloud, maybe you can give us a bit of insight into how you got into cloud solutions.
Yeah, thanks, Phil and Ed, for having me and that warm introduction. Thank you so much for that. I guess my journey with cloud goes way back, and it was very interesting because I was only, I think, 2 or 3 years into, working at a IT company in India. This is way back in 2010, by the way. And there came a project for a large rail company based out of Canada, where they had a lot of on-premises workload, and they were looking at maybe saving cost of running these workloads. And we were asked to come up with innovative ideas on how do they optimize their workloads to save cost of infrastructure. And I attended a couple of seminars, in-person seminars. We used to have them in India, in Bangalore, which is a city in India, where we had the AWS user group. And so a couple of AWS solution architects came in from the US, and they were presenting, and so I attended the seminar. So I got introduced to AWS and the cloud in those seminars. So I proposed to my team that maybe we should explore the cloud to see if this is quite possible for us to maybe help this customer save some cost. And so we kicked off a proof of concept way back in 2010, and that was the first time I set up my own personal AWS account, which, by the way, I still use to till today to run some internal personal projects, you can say. So we helped migrate a few applications from, so they were running on Linux, of course, and we migrated them from Linux on premises to Linux on EC2, or the Elastic Compute Cloud on AWS. And that was my first time experiencing the power of what cloud computing can help achieve. And this whole POC, we finished in 2 weeks' time. This was like the first time in the entire unit which I was in part of in this company that we completed a POC in 2 weeks, because most of the time this teams would spend too much time trying to figure out the infrastructure that they would use, plan the rollout of that infrastructure or access to that infrastructure, and there would be like months and months of planning and designing and collaboration. And here we were just spinning off infrastructure on a click of a button and completing a POC in 2 weeks. That was my first introduction to the cloud. Yeah.
Wow, two weeks to execute a whole POC. That's pretty impressive. I guess there's a lot of conversation around cloud technology. I guess it means different things to different people. I guess from your perspective, what exactly is cloud? Can you kind of give us a bit of a definition there? I know from our side we love definitions as well, but maybe you can give us some clarity around what is cloud.
Yeah, for sure, Phil. And I think I would also point out that there is an official definition to cloud computing, which was formed by the National Institute of Standards and Technology, or we call them NIST. This was coined way back in, I think, 2012. That's a very comprehensive, definition of what cloud computing is. But I'll give you my version, which is quite like crisp than theirs. Which, in my opinion, cloud computing is essentially an on-demand delivery of IT resources over the internet. So with a pay-as-you-go pricing. So instead of, like I was explaining, buying, owning, and maintaining physical data centers and servers, you can access technology services such as power of compute or storage or databases or network on a click of a button on a as you need basis from various organizations or cloud providers. And that's in essence, in a short way, I can summarize the definition of cloud computing.
So when it comes to cloud computing, Deeps, there's that perception as well. As much as like you mentioned, it's a fast delivery. You talk, the proof of concept, incredible 2 weeks. That's like a mic drop event. Like, can it really achieve this? And we've seen probably lots of large companies start looking at adopting it. Is cloud computing scalable? Is it across large to small? Well, how do you see it? Where are the savings? I can understand for large companies with infrastructure. What about smaller companies? How does that work for them?
Yeah, that's a very interesting point, Ed, because to be honest, in the current circumstances that we see, where you have this situation, there markets or businesses globally are having to be resilient in ever-changing landscape. For smaller businesses, it's quite important to be able to actually change the dynamics of their business a day's time, in weeks time, rather than spending time thinking how they would react to a changing dynamics. So for small businesses, speed to market is important, right? Like they want to develop products and services for their customers, make them available to these market segments across the globe in the most seamless and agile manner as possible, which is what the cloud can enable them to do. For example, this is just one use case where small businesses are today leveraging the cloud for. The second one is, the smaller businesses do not have the time and effort that they can't put into managing infrastructure. They have a certain core competency, which is what their business revolve around. You could be a retail company providing various kind of products on the internet, so you're an e-commerce company, but you might not have specialists who can help manage and run infrastructure for you. And at times this e-commerce company would have spikes. There would be events like we are right now in the US having the Halloween event, and there will be the Big Friday or Black Friday, we call it in the US, and there are certain events in India also like this. And during that time you would have to spun off a massive amount of infrastructure to cater to various kind of customer bases. You don't want to miss out, because in the current circumstances it's very challenging already for small businesses. So how do you offload that kind of resources to a cloud computing based infrastructure, so that it allows you to scale up and you only pay for when you use it, right? So you won't be using it when you scale down during normal hours or normal months, for example. And the final one, I think, for the small businesses is very critical, is the ability to visualize and understand at a granular level their infrastructure cost, and be able to do something about it in terms of like, how do I further optimize this cost. In the old data center world, there is a fixed cost. You buy a upfront for a capital set of infrastructure. You might not need it at times, and there is maybe not much you can do in terms of cost optimization. But with the cloud, in the ability of the granular cost visibility, you as a small business owner have the full access to figure out how do you optimize your cost, your ongoing cost. So you can be a very operationally efficient business while you're driving growth for your products and services.
And in that sort of mix, is there a particular point where some activities are in cloud and some activities remain on-prem? Are you noticing a certain mix that's, well, I wouldn't say right, but a trend?
Yeah, so when we start talking about the industries and we start talking about like various kind of industries like energy and utilities and manufacturing, there are certain workloads within these industries that still would remain, I would say, on premises for various reasons. Like they would need a low latency access to compute or data. For example, they need to be available in a real time fashion, and so network latency, you can't have that with the cloud. When you are in the internet, speed of light is a thing, right? So you can't be like always as close as you could be in the plant, for example. So those operational technology focused or OT focused workloads, we still see in the industry sector remaining on premises. And there is constant discussions with customers that I do have, where we're looking at what potentially we can bring to these workloads that provides them the flexibility and the scalability of the cloud.
Yeah, so I guess, having that elasticity within your cloud infrastructure enables customers or your users to be able to, have that visibility on cost and spin up services within that cloud environment, to kind of, ad hoc as well. So it's really interesting, I guess. Are you seeing, I guess, a trend in that sort of manufacturing space or energy usage space about what services they might be using in that kind of cloud environment?
Yeah, I mean, in the energy sector, I can speak because that's the one which I've been spending more time recently on. And to be clear, cloud is impacting the value chain, the energy value chain across the board. So you start with upstream oil and gas companies, right? These companies are responsible to figure out places where they can go and find oil or gas, right? And for that, they do a lot of data management, data interpretation, data processing. In traditional ways, when they would do this, they would bring a lot of terabytes or petabytes scale of data into on-premises environment, and they would do high performance compute over this data to process it. These are like sound signals that needs to be processed and digitized for various kind of tools and solutions to interpret this data. Essentially, the goal is to find the right place to go explore for further oil development or field development, you say. And so the cloud can bring the scale and the flexibility in a manner where you can ingest massive scale of data as you need it. You can spun off these high performance compute clusters to do various kind of processing on this data, and then you can spun off these solutions, digital solutions, to interpret this data, like identifying various kind of features, subsurface features we call them, right? And when you don't need it, you can archive this whole data, and you pay less price on storage, for example. And of course, you are not using the compute, so you won't pay a single penny for that compute, at least. And in traditional data center space, that's not possible, right? Like you have already invested a set amount of capital, and so you got to figure out how to use this capital or this investment in the best possible way. So this is just one example of like in the upstream value chain. Of course, there are many others in the retail where it's very, very required for, as a retailer, energy retailer, to be efficient, because it's a, like we take an example of Australia, it's a competitive market. Like you and I, we can today just discuss with our families, and tomorrow we switch off our retailer, right? So how do, as a retailer, I make more customer engaging customer experiences? How do I bring digital solutions quicker to them? And again, in the cloud space, there are many retailers who tries to leverage the cloud to develop these customer experiences, because it's quite fast and it is seamless, because you can interact globally if you have a global landscape, or you can just focus on one particular region, but you are not limited to a restricted set of infrastructure that is at your hand. So yeah.
I guess the birth of AWS was based on retail requirements from Amazon, right?
Yes,
I guess,
yes,
do you
yeah.
have any do you have any history there that we can leverage in this conversation?
I was not there at that time, but yeah, this was like way before I started in the, yeah, the AWS. But yeah, that was the humble beginnings of realizing the inefficiencies that exist within on-premises space, and the innovation that is getting hindered. And so my understanding is that the e-commerce business had the same sort of like challenges, and that was the time when we started forming these various services. So idea was to provide infrastructure through an API. So as a programmer, I don't have to like raise a service order or a ticket or some sort of like email chain to figure out which infrastructure should I use. I should be able to programmatically access the infrastructure whenever I need it. So, and that
Yeah.
started the journey of the AWS. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there was a famous email from Jeff Bezos that went out to the employees of Amazon and said, if we're not building these services or something along those lines, we need to be starting to build and productize these services within the Amazon network. So, cloud and AWS, as it seems, kind of born out of that necessity to improve their operations and improve internal efficiencies around distribution of data at the end of the day, as
There,
well.
there seems to be a lot of potential with cloud solutions. You mentioned a lot there in that very briefly there, Deeps. We know that the cloud providers also enable other companies to create solutions that sort of there's a change of ideas. AI is growing. We're seeing the birth. You mentioned about retailers using applications within cloud. So there's these there's lots that cloud offers, the ability to get to cloud that offer and connect to different services or plugins. But there's almost requires it's a challenge, I imagine, for companies because there's a massive amount of knowledge you've got to have in your business to take advantage of cloud applications. So, what are the common obstacles you see the companies face now when they want to move to when they hear and they know cloud brings benefits? I mean, you mentioned before about the financial benefit of not having to run and manage your own infrastructure. Then we've got those untapped benefits of applications that could connect to using APIs, whatever it might be. So, what are the obstacles? What are you seeing that when you talk to customers, what are the common obstacles you're facing?
Yeah, that's a very good question because it keeps coming back, and it's the. I mean, if I observe the trend in terms of my engagement so far, it has not changed, and we should be honest between ourselves. It is about change management, right? Like you bringing cloud into a conversation where cloud has never been there. You are introducing a change, and when you introduce change to any organization, small, medium, or large, you are trying to create some sort of like I don't know what to call, but like some sort of reaction. And it's typically the people and the culture which is the most important component, which we don't really pay attention to, but that's in my conversation starting to become like a norm. So it has never been the case, by the way, that we have stuck on a technical issue that we couldn't solve because of this change, but it's more on the people and culture. So the organizations, they are structured in a particular manner. There are people within these organizations who are responsible for certain roles, and there is a perception that the cloud can probably change the way they do their jobs, and they interact with technology in their daily lives as an employee of the organization. So it's really important for the senior leadership to be aligned and truly committed to this change. Of course, they should be looking at an appropriate level of messaging within their organization, describing this change, what it means for these employees of the organization, and how would this change will positively impact their daily lives. And in that regards, I think the skills enablement of the employees in the cloud technology is super important. Like it goes without saying that you can come up with a cloud project in an organization, and if you don't skill up those employees of that organization, good luck operationalizing that workload in a longer term. So if you think about the longer term success of any organization with the cloud, enabling those people is important. And then it's about like how do you execute on the change. There are certain ways. There are times when you would lack the capabilities internally. So choosing the right partners who would help you accelerate towards this journey with the right level of experience, who can be agile in some of these execution styles, for example. So you don't get paralyzed in that ever growing assess and then figure out what to do and then again assess, and so don't go into that paralyzing cycle of making decisions. Work in an agile manner with partners who have proven their effort and work. And of course, yeah, I would again summarize saying that skills so important for senior leaders to pay attention to it when implementing a cloud-based change in their organization.
Are you seeing companies partnering with people to bring that skill level in? If you don't have it, are they partnering with specialists in that space?
Yeah, of course. I think everybody is realizing that there is not going to be, there is not going to be like a single partner in this space. There will be multiple partners who would come in with the multiple levels of specialized skill sets, because there are various kind of persona you can imagine in a typical, energy customer, for example, or energy company. You would have people who are responsible for field engineering, mechanical engineer, rotating equipment engineer, and then you have somebody sitting in the back office, working out reports and charts and stuff like that. Somebody at the sales department trying to figure out how to generate more leads or cater to customers. So various personas, right? So it's not possible for one single partner to bring expertise in all these areas. So customers are realizing it. They are focusing on specialist helps where it is required, to upskill these peoples in the cloud technologies and how cloud can help solve for those problems. And I'm seeing a trend where these partners are hiring mechanical engineers or rotating equipment engineers, for example, in their own organization, so that these companies can become those partners for large energy companies, for example, to help them upskill their talent.
Yeah, I think that that investment in digital fluency, or at least being comfortable in that change management process, is really critical as well, because we talk about people, process, and technology in this, and we're really talking about people getting more comfortable with cloud type software platforms or services up in that cloud environment. So it's very, I guess, a challenging kind of point in time where the cloud is getting lower potentially as well, and more stakeholders are getting involved in the process. I guess you're talking to more of that very wide variation in stakeholders then.
Yeah, and I think it's also important to say that there is sometimes it becomes a critical point for a customer to make, in terms of like when they are in a bottleneck situation. When you talk about implementing change management, so you need to have a strong leadership displayed at times, and that goes without saying. So I keep saying senior leadership, but that leadership plays a very critical point in unblocking of various issues that might arise. So for leaders within any organization, this is a message. If you really want a cloud to be an enabler for your organization, or any change management, you got to show true leadership in these areas.
Yeah, and them investing their time into their digital fluency, right? So that they can convey the message that they need to do around change management, around those processes, like conveying the value of moving to a cloud solution. That I mean, myself and Ed have had hundreds of these conversations where we've brought people into the conversation so that they can get more of an educational point of view, because they might not necessarily know the benefits, maybe the uptime results of cloud, or the elasticity, or why we would choose cloud in these senses. Talking to OT operations, they're really trying to understand criticality, latency, where is the data going, how can they leverage it. Having those conversations with the operations team really enables them to champion it even within their own organizations. So yeah, it's pretty interesting how those conversations are changing as well. I guess you're in India at the moment. You're traveling the world. You have, I guess, an upcoming talk at the ADIPEC next month in Abu Dhabi about cybersecurity and operational technology in oil and gas industry. I guess, could you give us a bit of an understanding or a preview of what you might be talking at that presentation? It'd be kind of interesting to know a little bit of the insights there.
Yeah, no, definitely, Phil. And so, by the way, you can call it IDAPAC. That's the short form for that. And
Okay.
it's one of the largest oil and gas conferences in the world for various companies to attend and present. And so, yeah, of course, I'm presenting a technical paper that I have authored in the space of operational technology and security, especially. And so, as part of that, it's based on number of years of work, to be honest, working with various kind of oil and gas companies around the world in trying to help them increase or enhance their security posture of their operational technology landscape. And so what we see typically, customers start their journey when we start talking about the OT space, let's say, it's mostly about like, how do I bring my OT data to the IT, landscape so that my digital folks can create various kind of insights that I can leverage to maybe better optimize my, OT asset, let's just say. And this asset could be an oil or gas well, or it could be a processing facility, something like that. So that's typically the journey, and there are various patterns today available. A few years back, that was also quite a task in itself, trying to figure out how to actually establish a network connection and how do you bring this data in the most secure way or integration. So that's quite well defined these days. But more and more, what we are seeing is that the OT infrastructure itself is an aging asset. So it's constantly requiring various kind of updates, whether it is a hardware refresh or it is a software update. And it's causing a lot of pain for our customers, because it's not just a static asset in itself these days. With the great energy transition we talk about, there is a need for more energy in general also, as well as integrating various kind of distributed energy resources, for example. So we see this need for OT asset increasing, like in size and space, for example. And it's on-premises infrastructure can only do so much, is what the customers are realizing. So they're trying to figure out how do they start shifting some of these OT workloads to the cloud. And some of these use cases starts by, in the beginning, starts by moving their process historian, moving that from the OT landscape to the cloud. And for that, it's not a simple lift and shift, right? The process historians, they typically live in a Purdue model. They stay in a level 3 or 3.5. And that's where you also have your DMZs, for example, or demilitarized zones for the OT, where you separate traffic moving from OT to IT. So customers then comes to the realization, okay, if I have to move my process historian, I need to maybe figure out how do I bring the same level of security posture around these DMZs in the cloud. So we have done some work where we have helped customers build OT DMZs in the cloud. And we have proven to them that you can have in the cloud a completely private and isolated network, which is not connected to the internet. So there is no word internet in this infrastructure. It's entirely private and secure. You have the capability to inspect each and every packet that goes from your OT on premises to this cloud infrastructure. So you can do deep packet inspection. You have full control of the traffic flow. And you have much more granular level of access control and security than you could have in your on premises, because there are various security services within the cloud that you can use to not only understand who is doing what, for example, at any given point in time, but also through the power of automation, deploy various solutions in a quick and easy manner. So reducing the human, doing tasks can reduce significantly the scope of error, which sometimes can cause security incidents, as we found out. So through the automation piece also, you can bring various kind of benefits. And so over the period of many years, I have worked on projects, and my team has worked on these projects. We have developed a certain knowledge that I thought I'll write it down in a technical paper, so it gets published in the Society of Petroleum Engineering, and I present it at IDAPAC. So yeah, that's in a quick summary what I'm doing at IDAPAC. Happy to dive deep into any of these aspects that I mentioned and chat about them as well.
It's really interesting because I was going to ask you about this in our talk today, how people manage that cybersecurity. One of the fears of going cloud is the data becomes susceptible. How do I lock it down? How do I, like you mentioned, not have any internet connections? So because we work with some large customers, and especially governmental customers, they're quite concerned about the governance of their data. The large companies you mentioned. So hearing what you're saying really resonates a lot with what the concerns are with some of our large customers. I've got my DMZ, I've protected my data, I want to take advantage. I don't, because the other issue too, I can imagine, Deeps, is that you have data at the OT layer and you might replicate it at the cloud level, but it's not matched. It's all of a sudden you have your discrepancies. You're not as granular. So if you can have granular data, a cloud environment that's protected and sort of cocooned in a way, like a part of the DMZ, that's quite exciting. Can we just delve a bit deeper here? How you're doing that from OT, DMZ, and maintaining that DMZ structure into cloud?
Yeah, for sure, Ed. So, typically we see that this DMZ is a level 3 or level 3.5 in the Purdue model, right? So you start with your field sensors, your actuators, then you move up the stack, you have the PLCs and your RTUs, and then you would have some sort of like supervisory controller like a SCADA. And on top of that, you would have these process historian and various kind of firewalls that sits, and which is the level I'm talking about. We are in the we have worked with many customers to help them migrate this infrastructure to the cloud. And so for that to happen, the most important thing is you have to have a secure network and security foundation in the cloud, which you can, as a OT person, trust on. And so, we start with the basic, right? Like in the cloud, if I have to use any of the services, I have to create an account. And so when I create an account, I have the flexibility and availability of setting up an organization, and we call this the AWS organization. So in the AWS organization, you can define your various workloads, how would they be running in which accounts, for example. So you can have a multiple account strategy, so you're not focused on one single account. You can have many accounts for many kind of workloads, and you can then define what we call the service control policies. So this essentially dictates what actions are allowed or not allowed in these accounts. And one of those actions could be nobody can create anything that is internet accessible in these accounts. So that's it. That's like a ground truth applicable to all those accounts that belongs to this OT domain, let's just say. And so these kind of various features are available through service control policies. So that's your first level of setting up the infrastructure. Then when you start building this infrastructure for the workloads to come in, we have a concept called, or a service called virtual private cloud, or VPCs. So VPC is essentially your network boundary. So how you define your network in the cloud is through the VPC. So if you want to have a private, isolated network boundary of your own in the cloud, you create a VPC and you set it up in a way that it has no connectivity to anything else. And so any workload running in it would have no access to anything. And then you start opening up where you think you need access. So for example, in this case, if you want to bring the DMZs from the on-premises to the cloud, you would have to have network connectivity from the on-premises infrastructure to the cloud, which typically happens through either dark fiber or some sort of encrypted tunnels, so VPN tunnels. And you can connect. We have various services for that, like AWS Direct Connect for the dark fiber or optical fiber connectivity options, or our managed VPN service. And you are not limited to those. If you prefer to use a third-party software, or you already use it for your VPN services, or something like that, like Fortinet or Palo Alto, you can deploy them in this secure virtual private cloud in the cloud.
I want to take a quick moment to thank our main sponsor today, Smithtek. Smithtek specializes in turnkey hardware and software solutions, making remote monitoring and control a breeze. Whether it's agriculture, mining, industrial automation, or even environmental monitoring, Smithtek has you covered. Built right in Perth, Western Australia, their products are reliable, scalable, and adaptable to your needs, whether you're managing pumps, irrigation systems, or generators from afar. Plus, with their web-based SCADA system and support for a wide range of industrial protocols, integrating your systems is seamless. Their user-friendly interface gives you real-time control anytime, anywhere. If you're looking for a smarter way to manage your assets, Smithtek makes it easy and efficient.
So once you have the connectivity, you can start migrating data and various other things. But before you do that, you want to make sure that who access this cloud infrastructure and you have complete control over it. So setting up of like Active Directory or ADs and making sure the user and identities have the right access only, and you have proper audit trails, and it is feeding this data into a centralized security information event management or SIM tooling that you might have. So it's all set it up before you even move the workload. And typically what we see is customers move workloads which are more like data intensive in nature. So like I mentioned, the process historian is the kind of workload that we have seen a lot in terms of getting moved to the cloud in this secure DMZ environment. The cloud's elasticity and scalability allows you to scale this up in case you need to for certain use cases. But the point is, this workload needs to be made available to various other use cases that exist maybe in the level 4 of the Purdue model. So how do you make that accessible? In the on premises, you would have firewalls and you would provide access to required ports. In the cloud, you can similarly do that, but there are other ways also. Like we have a service called AWS Private Link, which is essentially like a way to expose layer 7 traffic without having to create open ports in firewalls, for example. And it's a secure way of accessing certain APIs. But you can also have firewalls like layer 4 firewalls in the cloud, and you can deploy deep packet inspection on those layer 4 firewalls to make sure that you can control the traffic flow, for example. So we have our own managed firewall option called AWS Network Firewall that you could use, or you could bring third-party partner approved firewall solutions that could be deployed as a virtual machine in the cloud. But this is the kind of environment that we typically set up for our customers, and we have done it now a few times, which starts building up trust. And more what we now see is customers thinking about like the level 3 as well, and down below, like supervisory control. Like how do I maybe build something like a supervisory control in the cloud? Maybe it is not the primary controller, but it is a backup controller, right? And the options are open. But because you have set up the secure foundation, this is now possible. Otherwise, you can talk all day long about this, cloud and OT can work together. I think in the absence of convincing the security people, it won't.
Yeah, it sounds like you put some work into that, proving that out. Because one of the when you talk about level 3 and getting the process historian data out, one of the key, I suppose, not challenges that people are looking for is the predictive maintenance, is getting this data, and analyzing it, and taking advantage of computing power that you just can't get on-prem. You can, but it's just so expensive. But doing it in cloud, and if you can do it with that sort of level of protection, all of a sudden these sort of OT wish list things become reality, like predictive maintenance and those sort of. Is that what you're seeing happening? People looking at
Yeah,
predictive maintenance as one of the main reasons to integrate
yeah.
OT
Predictive
into
maintenance.
cloud.
Yeah, predictive maintenance is definitely one of the use cases. In fact, my first use case of working in the OT environment, which is a few years back, was around remote monitoring. Customer wanted to remotely monitor their assets instead of sending physically people out, and they want to take all this telemetry data and provide it to people. And this could be unstructured data like video feeds as well from cameras, right? And so you could imagine the power of cloud playing out really well, where you could create various kind of dashboards for these folks out there who would go physically inspect these assets, and now setting in the back office trying to not just view the asset, but also gain much richer insights in terms of what you mentioned around predictive maintenance and finding out optimization strategies. So one customer's actually helped worked with us to build a recommendation system where the operators get certain recommendations based on key events that are happening in the asset, so they can maybe prioritize their activities accordingly. Because as an operator, you would be dealing with so many things, and if you can get a prioritized list of high value activities, which can only be possible if you can tap into this OT data and bring it out in the cloud environment, where you can do these various kind of AI and ML on top of it to create these recommendations. then only these things can happen. So this recommendations was created, and the customer provided it to the operator, which disliked some of these recommendations based on its value. But over a period of time, you can imagine the operator providing this feedback, and there are certain recommendations that are highly prioritized or highly recommended by the operators themselves. These could then potentially become events that can go into the control system for things like set point changes. So if you now imagine not having an operator looking at the recommendation and applying that recommendation in the control system, this is going straight into the control system because they have been vetted over a period of many months, maybe years. So that's the power that you can bring if you can bring strong security and network foundation on the cloud for your OT data, and then make it accessible for these kind of use cases like you mentioned, predictive maintenance, remote monitoring. And then eventually when you start getting trust on it, you can do much more like closed loop control, like I mentioned in the end.
Yeah, the I guess the closed loop control is the kind of holy grail of operations, right? Where you're collecting data out at the edge, and it's all contextualized, it's normalized, and then we're pushing it all the way up to the cloud where we're doing those ML and AI type ones. I guess one of the exciting areas in tech today is around generative AI. I guess, how do you envision that, I guess, the next iteration of generative AI transforming I know the energy sector is that something that you really specialize in?
Yeah. I mean, it's truly exciting what generative AI can do, and I've seen a few great case studies of actual implementation of generative AI into a customer environment as well. In my opinion, I think it's a pivotal moment in our industry, in the technology industry, that generative AI brings, because it for the energy sector, especially if I highlight it, we talk about data a lot, but to be honest with you, when you look at the data landscape of these energy customers, there is a lot of dark data. When I say dark data, it's like data that has never been tapped into. And this is typically those unstructured data. This is not the data that is stored in your process historian, maybe. It is the data which is stored in your Microsoft SharePoint, or it's stored in some sort of like shared drive. It's PDF files, it's image files, it's that type of unstructured data, handwritten reports of an operator doing an inspection of an asset that just broke like last week. So imagine tapping into this data, creating your enterprise knowledge base, making it accessible for various use cases. And that use case in generative AI space typically starts with some sort of like a virtual assistant or digital assistant, which you can interact with, and you can ask various questions, and it can give you various insights. So that's taking off that cognitive load of a human operator when they start analyzing for various kind of situation. Like imagine yourself being that field operator trying to figure out how can you go and do a workover and be ready when you are at the asset, and imagining taking dumps from various sources to figure out that piece of information. And now you can talk to this digital assistant, and you can imagine the cognitive load already decreasing. So that's where typically customer starts, and that's has been successful. I have seen many use cases like that in the energy sector with customers. But more recently, the concept of generative AI agents, and more importantly, the way the agents can interact between themselves is coming into picture. So an agent essentially is nothing but like a generative AI agent is essentially a way to describe a complex task that agent can perform on your behalf. And sometimes for example, you are a, let's say, mechanical engineer responsible for a rotating equipment, and you are supposed to do an inspection on an asset that comes under your preview. There are certain things that you do as part of your workflow, right? You go and look at, before you go at the asset, you go and look at the various history about this asset, what has been happening in this asset, its performance characteristics. In case you find that there is potentially a requirement for you to do maintenance, you might want to check on the spares and parts in your warehouse, your ERP system. So there is a set of tasks which you can codify and implement as a generative AI agent. So the agent becomes a little bit creative and make sure that it can execute on a complex task. So this is just one domain where I'm talking about, like asset integrity, for example. But there could be another agent in the same organization that does maybe, say, for example, field optimization. and its responsibility is around like, how do I make sure that my asset is producing the maximum output while causing the minimum downtime. And so there are two agents now, like you have the field optimization agent and you have the maintenance agent. And imagine these agents talking to each other, making interactions, and then figuring out how do they work together better for their various personas. And so you could imagine like complex workflows where field optimization agent can perform a full field optimization plan, making sure that equipment downtime is considered in a way that because equipment downtime means loss of production. You don't want that. You want to maximize production. So these two agents working out in a smart way, understanding performance characteristics of existing assets to generate a field plan or optimization plan that gets sent as set points into the control system. So that's the true power of the generative AI that I think energy customers are trying to figure out how to leverage and build upon. But the technical nuts and bolts exist today. Like in the cloud or anywhere you go, you can see a lot of research in this area, and technical solutions being built. It's about like building out a real solution for this in a real customer base. We have been working in this space quite a lot in AWS. We have in Houston, we had our energy symposium in just August this year, where we announced the launch of generative AI agents for energy. So this is our first step towards that initiative, but I think there is more to come, and it's the most exciting space to be in.
Oh, absolutely. You just said so many things there. I think, wow, talking about agents and potentially then you got a purchasing agent to ensure that the spare part that isn't on the shelf is ordered correctly from the supplier agent, so that it gets delivered to the right location for the maintenance guy to do the work. It's quite mind blowing to think that where we come from. You've been 15 years. You've been working. I think you said Deeps in this space.
Yeah.
15 years on, you're here now. Can you 15 years ago, would you have seen where we are today?
No, not at all. I think this is a ever changing and ever growing landscape which we work in. So and that's the one reason why I still am in technology and I'm not chosen a separate or different area of work.
We're living in the future, aren't we?
Yeah.
Well, I recently saw a snippet of two AI podcast hosts. So I think we're in a dying landscape as well as as well.
You've got Deeps. It sounds like you're a continual learner. One thing that Phil and I do, we're always learning. We're on a learning journey ourselves. And with all you've taught today, I've learned a lot just in these last 45 minutes or so with you. So what about yourself? What are you exploring? What are you excited? I think generative AI is big on the topic then, but what are you looking at? What are you excited about learning in your career as over the next 12 months or 24 months? Where are you going?
Yeah, for sure, Ed. And I think this is regardless of where I am. So right now I'm in Amazon, of course, and Amazon has a leadership principle called learn and be curious. So as part of that, we are basically asked to focus on learning ourselves, learning new technologies, learning new areas of growth that we can incorporate in our careers, and be curious at all times, right? So how can we think outside of the box? But I've been like a true learner myself. I started as a software programmer way back, and moved into infrastructure, and now into OT and energy sector. I'll be honest, I don't come from the energy sector myself, but having now spent a few years in the energy sector working with energy companies around the world, I realized that of course there is a huge potential technology can play for supporting these customers, but at the same time I can maybe learn a few things as well. So one of the areas that I am trying to increase my proficiency, you can say, is on the subsurface, which is like everything that happens below the surface in the oil and gas. And there are various technical areas of expertise in this and that I need to maybe skill myself up. Is just my passion generally, because I see a lot of potential in this space from a career perspective for myself, and also it makes me more relevant to the customer conversations, right? So I am not like flying blind at times. So that's definitely one area. You can say it's more industry domain specific and not technology specific. But in the technology area, generative AI, of course, I have had many projects in the IoT space of my personal use that I have used to like learn about IoT. But I've never had a chance to maybe do a full smart home implementation at my house. So that's probably another area that I need to maybe learn. That's one of my passion areas. So I want to maybe find some time to get it done.
I'm sure Phil can help you out there.
Oh, I know, I know. That's one of the reasons we were also connected on LinkedIn. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's plenty of rabbit holes we can go down on the on the home automation side for sure. But yeah, it's been I guess an absolute pleasure having you on the show today, and it's been a really enlightening conversation. I've really enjoyed the conversation around cloud and actually understanding a bit around change management and what kind of conversations we have to have to get that adoption of cloud technology. And it's really one of those, I guess, challenges that we know exists within the infrastructure, but it's about tackling those head on and understanding actually the leadership portion of that conversation and how critical that is for communicating. So really appreciate your time today, Deeps, and look, we'd love to have you back on as well to talk more about cloud and where AWS can support people learning this infrastructure as well. So really appreciate that.
No, thank you so much, Phil and Ed, for your time. I think it is quite late for you, so really appreciate that. And it's absolute privilege of mine as well, being invited for this prestigious podcast show, because I follow this very closely on LinkedIn, because I am added. We are friends on LinkedIn, Phil, and now Ed as well. And so I do see a lot of updates, and yeah, it's quite, you have had like very prestigious people come in, so it's just my honor to be here.
Oh, well, thank you very much, Deeps. It's really the guest that you are happy to share your information, your knowledge. That's what we're looking for. Phil and I, we're hungry to talk and learn. We continue doing it, and you've taught us a lot around cloud computing. I loved how you mentioned about that private cloud and having the DMZ and OT, because these are places that we can help our customers. We're never going to articulate it like you do, but at least we know who to go to, right? Who the specialists are in this space. And if anyone can gain any knowledge from these events, that's great. That's all we're interested in, is just sharing and have others share the information. So I'm sure a lot of listeners will take a lot out of what you've talked around today. So Deeps, I'm sure they'll connect with you via LinkedIn like I just did. That's easy to do, and I know you're willing to share your knowledge. So thank you very much for being on this podcast today, Deeps.
Yes, thank you, Ed, for having me.
And to all our listeners, and don't forget to subscribe to the Unplugged and IoT podcast. You'll find it on Spotify, on YouTube. We're pretty much on every platform. So look, please support the podcast by, I guess, giving us a review, a 5-star review on those platforms. So yeah, I guess till next time, tuning in. We'll see you next time. Thanks, Ed. Thanks, Deeps.
Thanks, Phil.
Thanks.
Talk soon.
Bye.